Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Israeli military, plans to enter Gaza, quote, with full force in the coming days. On Tuesday, Israel said it carried out an airstrike on what it said was a Hamas command center in southern Gaza. The Hamas-run civil defense agency said some 30 people were killed and dozens more were wounded in the airstrikes. This as more aid agencies warn of widespread starvation in Gaza. Israel has not allowed in aid deliveries since a ceasefire deal with Hamas collapsed more than 2 months ago. Okay, let's get more with DW senior international correspondent Fanny Fadshah, who's joining us from Jerusalem. Fanny, what more can you tell us about this latest attack?
First of all, there were several airstrikes in various parts of the Strip, and according to Gaza health officials, at least 48 people have been killed and many injured. But now, looking at that particular strike near Khan Yunis, at the European hospital, the plume of smoke, it certainly is one of the most significant airstrikes in recent weeks. And certainly it comes at a very delicate time, at a very significant time, because just on Monday, Hamas militants released the last surviving American-Israeli hostage, which was seen by U.S. officials as sort of a commitment, a goodwill by Hamas to maybe jumpstart, revive any ceasefire, any progress towards a ceasefire deal with Israel. But the question is just how much Israel is committed. Now, Israel claims that they were, as you just said, they were targeting Hamas militants that allegedly operated from beneath the hospital, something that we have heard over and over again since the Gaza war began October 7th, 2023. It is unclear, in fact, whether Hamas militants have been killed. Also unclear and unconfirmed at this point whether Mohammed Sinwar, the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar and the former top leader of Hamas, has been the target, number one, and whether he has been killed. Mohammed Sinwar is basically one of the last surviving masterminds and architects behind October 7th attacks. So with all what's happening right now in Gaza, it certainly doesn't point toward an end to the war, but also less likely towards any ceasefire at this point.
And how could Israel's move to expand the war in Gaza impact Trump's tour in the Middle East and his aim to bring an end to the war in Gaza?
That's a really good question, because if we just listen to the language between US President Donald Trump and what Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel has to say, it seems to be very much opposed to each other at this point, because Trump, like a prayer, keeps repeating he wants an end and a quick end to the Gaza war, while Prime Minister Netanyahu keeps saying he wants to expand the war. In fact, there was a Security Cabinet decision on May 5th to not just expand the war, expand the offensive across the Strip, but also to likely, effectively, permanently occupy the Strip. So looking at this language, obviously, it doesn't look like there is some sort of an agreement. However, given the fact that an Israeli delegation is on the way to Doha, on the way to Qatar, so is a US delegation, but also US President Trump, gives some hope that maybe Qatar, being a key mediator and having been a key mediator in the process of the past 19 months, may result in some sort of pressure. And this is the question, just what kind of language and actions Mr. Trump is going to use, and whether Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to listen to that language. So a lot depends also, as Mr. Trump continues his tour across the Middle East, what Qatar and other mediators between the US and Israel are able to achieve, but also, once again, what Mr. Trump is able to do in terms of exerting pressure on Israel.
And Fanny, a word about aid. I mean, what can you tell us about plans to get aid into Gaza, given the growing fears that Gazans are facing starvation unless aid deliveries are restored fast?
In fact, it's been more than 2 months now that not one single truck has entered Gaza Strip, and that means no medical aid, no food whatsoever, nothing, the very basics that people actually need to survive. So there have been reports pointing out over and over again how dire the situation is. And Israel actually just recently put forward a potential aid mechanism, which is backed by the United States, which, however, would rely on private companies to distribute aid. But that distribution would not start, according to Israel's plan, before this renewed offensive, or in fact an expansion of their offensive in Gaza starts. As a result, less surprising it is that the head of the US aid pointed out that this is, quote, cynical and basically just would lead to further displacement of Palestinians, because just from a very practical sense, in order to go to any distribution center, you would need to get there. For that, you need fuel. You need some sort of a logistical process in place. And all of that, with Gaza being largely destroyed since the past 19 months, is very much not feasible. Hence, there's a lot of criticism and there's a lot of talk. But the question is when there will be action to actually help and make sure that Palestinians have access to much needed aid.
DW Senior International Correspondent Fanny Fatcher. Fanny, thank you so much. Now, as we are hearing, Trump's Middle East trip is largely focused on business deals, and it does not include a stop in Israel. Now, this despite the US president promising to help bring about a quick end to the war in Gaza.
Donald John Trump do solemnly swear.
Hopes were high at the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency that there would be an end to the war in Gaza. A ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas came into effect just a day before Trump's inauguration in January. His Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff played a role in brokering the deal. A pause in Israel's offensive in Gaza and the release of hostages provided some relief to Palestinians and Israelis. In February, and speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump said the United States would take over Gaza.
We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
He also proposed that Gazans be relocated.
Yeah, I would like to see Jordan. I'd like to see Egypt take some look. The Gaza thing has not worked. It's never worked. And I feel very differently about Gaza than a lot of people. I think they should get a good, fresh, beautiful piece of land, and we get some people to put up the money to build it and make it nice and make it habitable and enjoyable and make it a home.
Trump also specified how many Gazans would be relocated.
All of them. I mean, we're talking about probably 1,000,007 people, 1,000,007, maybe 1,000,008. But I think all of them. I think they'll be resettled in areas where they can live a beautiful life and not be worried about dying every day.
The US president's comments were condemned by Palestinians and many leaders around the world. Experts in international law said Trump's proposals to forcefully relocate Gazans amount to a war crime or crime against humanity. His press secretary later said it would be a temporary solution. Weeks later, Trump caused outrage again when he released an AI video showing Gaza as a tourist destination, the so-called Riviera of the Middle East. The Trump administration has been unwavering in its support to Israel. There's been no let-up in the flow of US military aid during the ceasefire period, but concerns have been mounting over the level of interest from Trump in pushing for a new ceasefire and hostage release deal. His trusted negotiator, Steve Witkoff, has also been given the task of ending Russia's war in Ukraine. But the White House said Trump remains committed to securing the immediate release of all hostages and an end to Hamas rule in Gaza. For now, he's not achieved either objective.
Mustafa Barghouti is a prominent independent Palestinian politician and a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, which is the legislative branch of the Palestinian Authority. He's joining us today from Paris, and I'd like to welcome you to DW, Mr. Barghouti. Thank you so much for your time today. Given Palestinians' hopes and fears about the second Trump presidency, can I ask you what you expect from this trip that Donald Trump is on right now?
Well, the least we should expect is an end of the massacres that are taking place in Gaza. This morning, the Israeli army killed 66 more people, mostly children and women. Yesterday, they killed 45 people. Yesterday, they bombarded the only lasting, really functional hospital, which is the European hospital in Khan Yunis, and attacked it with 6 rockets. What we need is an end of this terrible war and a real immediate exchange of prisoners, so that all the Israeli captives can be released, and not in portions, but completely, in exchange of releasing Palestinian prisoners and ending this war. Netanyahu has conducted several provocations yesterday and the day before yesterday, specifically to undermine that possibility.
And Mr. Trump said yesterday, in fact, that he was working to end the Gaza war as quickly as possible. You say, of course, that this is necessary. Do you think, though, that this is one of President Trump's priorities right now?
I'm not really sure, but this is the test to him after the release of Alexander Edan, who was released as a good gesture to President Trump. Palestinians expect an end of this terrible humanitarian siege on Gaza, which has lasted already 73 days. When Israel is not allowing a single piece of bread or any medications or any glass of water to enter Gaza. We're at the edge of having a biological warfare. We're at the edge of having outbreak of severe epidemics, including poliomyelitis, which is very dangerous, tetanus, diphtheria, everything, because Israel is preventing vaccines from getting to children. So the hope was that there will be immediate end of this terrible siege, allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza, and then a successful negotiations, which Witkoff is conducting, to end this war and have a release of the Israeli captives as well. But it seems that Netanyahu doesn't care about these captives. Trump tried to give the impression that he cares about Israel more than Netanyahu. So can he pressure Netanyahu? He can. Would he be able to stop Netanyahu? I'm sure he can. Does he have the will? I don't know. We have to check and wait and see and what will happen in the coming days.
We are hearing about a possible meeting between President Trump and Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian National Authority. If this were to happen, what would a meeting like this mean? And what would Palestinians consider a success?
A success would be to bring back the issue of the right of the Palestinian people to have self-determination and a state of their own, and to re-establish the link between West Bank and Gaza. In the last statements of Mr. Trump since he was elected, he never mentioned the idea of a Palestinian state, which he used to talk about in his previous presidency. Now he's talking only about Gaza, as if Gaza is not part of the Palestinian territory. And he even advocated for a while, as you mentioned in your report, a terrible idea, which is the war crime of ethnic cleansing of all the population of Gaza. Now maybe he is retreating a little bit from that idea, which I hopefully will be permanent. But Netanyahu is using Trump's previous statements, as a legitimization of his declared openly goal, which is ethnic cleansing of all Palestinians from Gaza. That is the most dangerous thing that can happen. It will destabilize the region forever. And that's why I hope that the whole thing will be addressed. The problems in the Middle East start from one point, the Palestinian issue. And no arrangements, no peace can be achieved without solving the right, without admitting the right of the Palestinian people to be free from occupation, to be free from oppression, to be free from the displacement we've been subjected to for 77 years and the longest occupation in modern history. I hope Mr. Trump can realize that if he wants peace in this region and stability and economic growth, everything starts with ending the Israeli illegal occupation of Palestinian land.
Mustafa Baghouti, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.